One of the great honors we've had as a congregation is to be able to welcome back to Omaha our very own student Cantor Benjamin Brodkey, who finished recently his first year of study in Israel. And Temple Israel is proud to be able to sustain and support the future leaders of Jewish communities throughout our nation and throughout our world. And with that in mind, we're now going to give this space to Benjamin to be able to share some of his thoughts with us in a Devar Torah. And then afterwards, you can congratulate him and offer words of encouragement. But more than that, I would also encourage you to offer words of pride to his loving mother and father, and to his grandparents as well. Benjamin, the congregation is all yours.
It's like my bar mitzvah again.
Absolutely. And we have candy ready just in case.
Oh, gosh. So when people begin studying Mishnah or the Talmud, its successor, they often begin from the very beginning. They start with Tractate Brachot about blessings and the laws surrounding prayer, mostly because it's one of the easier tractates to learn. The first few chapters begin with the laws surrounding the recitation of the Shema. We know the basics: morning, evening, when we rise, when we lie down. And these books go into the nitty-gritty of when to say it, what time of day and night, how early, how late, how to say it, in what position, lying down, standing up, on the way, and where to say it, on the road, or do we stop in an old decrepit building? The answer is no, by the way. And what is the point about going into all of this detail? In the 3rd century, when the Mishnah was compiled, we did not have the full liturgy of the prayer service as we know it now. We had the essentials. We had the Shema, the structure of a few blessings surrounding her, and we had the Amidah. Yet, this became the basis for our prayer services recited daily nearly 2,000 years later. Of course, it's essential that we know how to properly say the text, which became the watchwords of our faith, as these phrases have been continuously repeated throughout the generations, and now through us. A Midrash even tells us that our forefather Jacob had recited the Shema continuously with his children long before Moses incorporated the text into his speech. It is noteworthy that the traditional study of Mishnah, the individual snippets, the Mishnayot, are short and meant to be learned through repetition, as that is how our sages were able to memorize these sayings before they were ever written down. Something is comforting in the act of repetition, whether that be the Mishnayot, the Shema, the prayers we say daily, or the stories that we tell. After all, we repeat our Torah cycle year after year. The words have not changed, but possibly we have. These Mishnaic and Talmudic texts do not focus on whether we should say the prayers, but rather when, how, and why. Judaism assumes that repetition matters. But we repeat far more than we realize. We recognize that repetition is not unique to Judaism. It is part of being a human. My grandfather likes to tell stories, often true or slightly exaggerated, and often my family and his friends hear these stories in cycles. He can be stuck on one story for weeks at a time, and it changes ever so slightly when he tells it, each time he tells it. And most recently, it's been a story about a nightmare boat trip that my aunt took while he and my grandmother watched my cousin. And each retelling of the story became a chance for him to notice something that we had missed previously. The Torah works in the same way. The first paragraph of the Shema comes to us in this week's Torah reading, Ve'et Hanan, the second book of Devarim, the second parsha of the book of Devarim, immediately following the repetition of the 10 Commandments, the 10 sayings, 10 utterances, whatever you want to call them, Rabbi. The big question may remain, why does the Torah repeat itself? If every word of the Torah is both true and essential to the understanding of its contents, why are these commandments repeated, and why does the book of Devarim essentially act as a summation of the 4 previous books? The book of Devarim had a special name amongst the sages, Mishneh Torah, the repetition of the law. Deuteronomy, the Greek name for the book, comes from this understanding. It is not a copy from the previous books, rather it's a retelling. One from a certain perspective, that of a man nearing death, hoping for success for the people he had led out of slavery and through the wilderness on the next stage of their journey into the land of Israel. The Ten Commandments look different through the perspective of Moses. Likutei Sichot, the teachings of Menachem Mendel Schneerson, argue that this repetition by Moses adds a more human element. And at the same time, these words are being spoken to a different audience, 40 years after the original revelation at Sinai. There was a unique purpose to this speech. Yes, to speak to the new generation about to enter Israel, but also to last through the generations. So notably, the utterance about Shabbat differs between the two tellings. In Exodus, the commandment is to Zachor, remember the Sabbath day. And here in Deuteronomy, we hear and we are told to Shamor, to observe or keep the Sabbath day. The piyut, the liturgical hymn Lecha Dodi, which we sang earlier, one of the verses reminds us of both of these commandments, Shamor v'Zachor b'dibur echad. They were uttered in one word, that is, at the same time. Some teach that the first, the Zachor, is all about the things that we should be doing on Shabbat, such as celebrating it with joy, with food, with songs, with prayer. And the other, the Shamor, is the observance of Shabbat, focusing on the things that we should restrain ourselves from doing, such as the mundane work of the week. These words are complementary to each other. So, why doesn't Judaism simply explain something once? Possibly because it leaves no room for argument or a deeper understanding. Oftentimes, this repetition leads and reveals another layer rather than merely repeating the same information. A few years ago, the Federation of European Neuroscience Societies published an article about the use of dopamine neurons in familiarity. They concluded that the repetition of routine activities activates part of our brain that releases dopamine, a chemical that makes us feel good. Our routines should become ritual, argues Well Williamsburg, an organization focused on behavioral health. Ritual helps us control our feelings and our emotions, can lower anxiety, and improve our mood. Ritual creates stability, predictability, meaning, and comfort. Judaism has always known this. Our tradition offers many ways to feel this comfort, routine, habit, as part of becoming ritual. Ritual is when we take these routines and make them sacred, waking us up to something special. Abraham Joshua Heschel writes in his book, God in Search of Man, our goal should be to live life in radical amazement. Get up in the morning and look at the world in a way that takes nothing for granted. Everything is phenomenal. Everything is incredible. Never treat life casually. To be spiritual is to be amazed. He argues that our ritual can lead to something larger than ourselves. This means we don't necessarily change the things that we repeat, we change our approach. For a long time, I've been enchanted by the ritual of prayer. I have a daily prayer ritual. I use a more traditional siddur. I've been in a fellowship for teachers of Jewish prayer, and I helped revamp a religious school prayer curriculum. I love ritual. I love the ritual of talking with God and talking about the ritual of talking with God. Recently, I read Casper ter Kuile's book on ritual, and he spoke about prayer with an interesting framework. Prayer is like a workshop for the soul. So I invite you to imagine this workshop. Maybe not with a saw and a hammer, but a workshop is where we practice, where we can refine our skills and improve our craft. It's the opposite of a one-stop shop. We return, striving for success. These prayers do not change so that we can notice how we have enriched our soul. The soul is nourished, and it depends on the day of Shabbat for that refreshment. And perhaps this is why we have ritualized the day. Heschel also writes, Sabbath isn't a time to catch up on tasks, nor is it simply a time of rest to prepare for a busy week. It's a time to revel in the beauty of and delight of simply being. The Sabbath is not for the purpose of recovering one's lost strength and becoming fit for the forthcoming labor. The Sabbath is a day for the sake of life. In the penultimate line of the Book of Lamentations, which we read on Tisha B'Av earlier this week, it reminds us about that returning and refreshing. Return to us, O God, and we shall return to you. These words that we repeat every time that we return the Torah to the Ark, and also they've also become a mantra in our upcoming high holiday season. This repetition, this ritual, which has been ingrained in our Jewish tradition, points here to return. We return to our souls, ourselves, and to God through Torah, Shabbat, prayer, and covenant. The question remains, why do the sages compiling the Mishnah dive so deeply into the laws of saying the Shema? Because of the opportunity which comes with this comforting ritual of return and radical amazement coming from acknowledging the one God. Every day we can return twice to these watchwords of our faith. Every week we can return to Shabbat, and every year we can return to our annual Torah cycle. Each generation can return to these same ancient words. Every time that we return, there is an opportunity to grow, not just to remember what has been and who we have been, but to discover who we are still becoming. Shabbat Shalom.